All right, hey guys. These are going to be two teaching videos on something that you've watched videos about and read about before called the New Deal. The New Deal was something that was created by one of America's presidents. His name is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was president from 1933 to 1945. So he was president for a long time. Some people think he was a great president. Some people thought that he was really bad. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's what this video is going to be about. Two things we're going to do. We're going to try to understand basics of the New Deal. Some of you know this already, but I just wanted to teach it just to give you another perspective on it. And also identify reasons people were opposed to the New Deal. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So the New Deal, again, it gets that name because back in the 1930s, think about when we talked about the stock market crashed and what happened to people. People who had invested their money and bought stocks ended up losing a lot of their money in the stock market crash of 1929. They lost their money, and because of that, they lost their homes, and it drove a lot of families apart. And the worst part of it was about 25% of America's people who could work no longer had jobs. So about 25% out of 100 people, about 25 of those people were not working. So it was a very, very bad time for America in the 1930s. It was called the Great Depression because the economy wasn't working well and a lot of people lost their homes and money. So with that, I'm just going to keep on going. The first thing that want to mention is this. So under Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the New Deal, this was intended to fix the Great Depression and make sure an economic depression does not happen again. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanted to be sure that he wanted to try to fix the problems. He wanted to make sure that nothing like this would ever happen again. And I also wanted to say this, while the New Deal does not fully fix the economy, it certainly does provide help and protection for people, for a lot of people who were in need back then. It didn't, give them all the help that they needed, but it certainly helped them a little bit in some ways. Like it gave them jobs, it gave them a little bit of protection in terms of their money. It did provide some help, and I think that's what's really important here. Some people might think that the New Deal was a bad thing. Well, maybe, but it certainly was helpful for people back then. All right. So, and I think this was in the videos that I assigned you to watch on Monday. The New Deal, there are three parts to it. And there are these three R's: relief, recovery, and reform. So it is relief for the unemployed and the poor. Remember, people who lost all their money in their homes. Well, what do you think they needed most? They needed somewhere to live, they needed to have a job, and they needed money to spend. And that's what this relief is for. If you think about that word relief, it's kind of like a weight is being lifted off your shoulders. You're not worrying about anything anymore. So that's kind of what relief means. Recovery of the economy. They're just trying to improve it, make it better, get it back to where it once was. And also this reform of banks. It's not just banks, it's about other things too, but just for the sake of the teaching lesson, I'm just going to focus on banks. So reform just means like to change, possibly to make things better, but reform is just kind of another word to say just to change. All right. And And so what I'm going to show you 3 different ways that FDR sought to relieve, recover, and reform America at this time. There was a bunch of stuff that he did, like a bunch of stuff, but I'm only going to focus on 3 things. And one of those first things was called the FDIC. And this is really important. This is something that your parents probably know about. But this is just another word of saying the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So I want you to think about a couple videos ago when we said that people were investing they were putting their money in banks or in businesses, and for the hopes that they could earn more money back. So going back to terms like risk in stocks, they would put their money in banks in the hopes that they could earn more money. However, think about what might happen if that bank goes out of business. What might happen if that bank fails? Well, guess what? You lose all your money. So sorry. Back then, there was no FDIC. So if a bank failed, well, you lost your money, unfortunately. But after the Great Depression, FDR said, you know what? That's not right. The government should create some sort of corporation that can protect or secure people's money even if a bank fails. So, like for example, your parents will put money in a bank. Let's say like PNC Bank or other bank, Bank of America or something like that. If that bank fails or if it goes out of business, well, guess what? Their money is going to be protected. The FDIC will ensure, or another word for like guarantee, that your parents will get your money back. And that's probably a good thing. If a bank fails, your parents can rest assured that they're going to get their money back. And a lot of these things I'm going over, it's there's a lot more to this, but I'm just trying to give the basics of it. So that the FDIC, that's one thing that FDR did. Another thing that he did, and you probably watched the videos about, is called the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps. Okay, so these 2 things down here. And think about in the Great Depression, remember how people lost their jobs, and you might see pictures of like people waiting in lines to get food or maybe to hopefully be hired for a job. Well, these two things, the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps, those were things created in the New Deal and by FDR to help give jobs back to people who needed them. And they essentially just put jobless people back to work. And they did a lot of stuff. They built roads, they built bridges and national parks, and they also built military bases. Those are good things. Country definitely needs roads and bridges and national. Well, you don't need a national park, but it certainly is. It's nice to have. If you've ever gone to a national park, some of those were built back during the 1930s, and of course, military bases. So again, those are just kind of jobs that were created by the New Deal. It gave people an opportunity to work again and to make money. All right, and this is one I want to talk about. This is a thing called Social Security. You guys may have heard of this before. And you've probably heard about it maybe because it's something maybe your parents or maybe your grandparents or your possibly great-grandparents use. Social Security, what it is that it helps older people who are retired or people who lose jobs. So think about like your grandparents. do any of your grandparents still work a job? Maybe, maybe not. But that doesn't mean that they're not making money. If they have Social Security and if they've applied for it and they get Social Security, they get a certain amount of money. I think it's every month, maybe, or every couple of months, to keep them having money in their bank accounts, I think. So that way they can afford to be in their apartment or their house if they so choose, to go to the grocery store. So for older people who no longer work, or who are maybe sick or can't work or stuff like that, Social Security just kind of gives them extra money to have just in order to live. And that might be a good thing. This is kind of like a service that government the government provides for people who can't work. It gives them a sense of security. They don't have to worry about where their money is going to come from. They know that they can be protected. So how it works, I'm just going to show you the textbook again. But this is kind of how it works. So you have workers. You have workers and you have businesses. They make money, but the government will tax those workers or those businesses, and that tax money goes to the government. Well, what is the government going to do with that money? Well, they are going to use that money and put it back and give it to the elderly or the unemployed. The government takes a role, and they help protect and give financial security to people who maybe can't work for themselves, based for whatever reason. Maybe they're too old to work, or maybe they got laid off from a job, or stuff like that. So some people think that that's a bad idea because the government is taking care of them, and we'll talk a little bit about that more. But anyway, that's what Social Security is. All right, I'm going to stop the video right here, and I'll pick it back up.